Good afternoon, everyone. I'm grateful to be here with the President as we release his budget for next year. As the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, I deal with a lot of numbers and charts and graphs, and they all matter. But that's not ultimately what budgets are about. Budgets are value statements. They're about the kind of country we want to be and the type of future we want to leave our kids. And from day one, the president has been clear that my job as OMB director is to ensure that the government delivers for all people and that our budget reflects our national values and priorities. I'm proud to say that's exactly what this budget does: invest in the American people in a fiscally responsible way. This budget will help ensure that prosperity is broadly shared, that we continue growing the economy from the bottom up and the middle out, that we make sure it works for working Americans who've been left out and left behind, who haven't benefited from the economic progress they helped make possible, that we are prepared to meet the full range of challenges and opportunities ahead of us. And it's a budget that includes proposals all Americans can come together around and that speak to our country's values at its best. And that's why it's my honor to introduce the President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Well, good afternoon, folks. It's been a busy couple of days for all of you. Let me begin by saying that thanking Director Young. You've heard me say this before over the years. My dad had an expression. He said, "Don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget. I'll tell you what you value. Don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value." Well, the budget I'm releasing today sends a clear message to the American people that what we value. First, fiscal responsibility. Second, safety and security. And thirdly, the investments needed to build a better America. The first value is fiscal responsibility. The previous administration, as you all know, ran up record budget deficits. In fact, the deficit went up every year under my predecessor. My administration is turning that around. Last year, we cut the deficit by more than $350 billion. This year, we're on track to cut the deficit by more than $1,300 billion. $1,300 billion. That would be the largest one-year reduction in the deficit in U.S. history. And here's how we're achieving this record deficit reduction. First, we're growing the economy. We've created a record 6.7 million jobs since I took office, and we've generated a GDP growth of 5.7%, the best economic growth we've seen in this country in over 40 years. This has led to substantial increase in government revenues and dramatically improved our fiscal situation. Secondly, this record economic and job growth has made it possible for us to responsibly and significantly cut back on emergency spending. Early in the pandemic, it was right to give people help to make ends meet and to keep this economy going. Because of the progress we've made dealing with these emergencies, the labor market is strong and unemployment claims are at historic lows. We ended the pandemic unemployment assistance programs because Americans are back to work. I'm calling for new pandemic subsidies for large businesses to not continue those because those businesses are back and moving again as well. But because we have to put this economy in a strong foundation, even the Delta and Omicron variants of COVID-19 and the cost of Putin's aggression in Ukraine have not required an additional fiscal package for state and local governments. But we still spend what we need to spend to continue to fight COVID. But those expenditures will be dramatically less than last year. Compared to 2020, we're reducing the size of the deficit relative to our economy by almost 2/3, reducing inflationary pressures, and making real headway cleaning up the fiscal mess I inherited. After my predecessor's fiscal mismanagement, we were reducing the Trump deficits and returning our fiscal house to order. Now, the budget I'm releasing today will continue this approach. It makes prudent investments in economic growth, a more equitable economy, while making sure corporations and the very wealthy pay their fair share. And I would add, nobody making less than $400,000 a year will pay a penny more in federal taxes. We can do this by, one, passing legislation that lowers costs for families on things like childcare, health care, and energy costs, while lowering our deficit at the same time. We can give hardworking parents raising children tax relief that gives them just a little bit of breathing room and lowers child poverty. We can give Medicare the power to negotiate lower prescription drug prices. This will bring down the cost for seniors and reduce the deficit by hundreds of billions of dollars. Congress can do this all right now. They're debating it now. We can also restore fiscal responsibility. The Trump tax cuts added $2 trillion in deficit spending and largely helped the rich and the largest corporations. Under my plan, as I said, no one making less than $400,000 a year will pay additional single penny in taxes. No one. If you don't make 400 grand, you're not going to pay a single penny in additional federal taxes. And the wealthy and corporations will finally begin to pay their fair share. For most Americans, the last few years were very hard, stretching them to the breaking point. But billionaires and large corporations got richer than ever. Right now, billionaires pay an average rate of 8% on their total income. 8%, that's the average they pay. Now, I'm a capitalist, but if you can make $1 billion, great. Just pay your fair share. Pay a little bit. A firefighter and a teacher pay more than double the tax rate that a billionaire pays. That's not right. That's not fair. And my budget contains a billionaire minimum tax because of that. With 20% minimum tax, it applies only to the top 1/100th of 1%. 1/100th of 1% of the Americans will pay this tax. The billionaire minimum tax is fair, and it raises $360 billion that can be used to lower costs for families and cut the deficit. As I said, my budget also ensures the corporations pay their fair share. In 2020, there were 50 Fortune 500 companies that made $40 billion in profit combined, but didn't pay a single solitary cent in federal taxes. My budget raises the corporate tax rate to 28%, far lower than the rate it was between World War II and 2017 when it was lowered as today. Last year, I rallied more than 100, some of you were overseas with me, 130 countries to agree to a global minimum tax for corporations doing business in their countries, to put an end to a tax system that rewards multinational corporations for shipping the jobs and profits overseas and avoiding taxes at home. It's my hope that Congress enacts this law this year so I can sign it and we can get to work. The second value my budget reflects is security. Security at home and security abroad. My budget tackles security in two key ways. First, it secures our communities at home. This is an issue families in every part of the country face. I've said it before. The answer is not to defund our police departments. It's to fund our police and give them all the tools they need, training and foundation and partners and protectors that our communities need. The budget puts more police on the street for community policing, so they get to know the community they're policing, allows the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and the FBI to hire the agents they need to help fight gun crime and other violent crimes in our communities, and funds body cameras and make sure police work with our local communities and are accountable to these communities. It funds crime prevention and community violence intervention, drug treatment, mental health, criminal justice reform, and reentry for people coming home after incarceration. All demonstrable ways to reduce crime and proven ways. Security also means national and international security. This budget provides the resources we need to keep Americans safe, ensuring that our military remains the best prepared, best trained, best equipped military in the world. This budget also provides additional funding to forcefully respond to Putin's aggression against Ukraine and its economic, humanitarian, and security consequences. The world has changed. In addition to dealing with terrorist organizations, for the second quarter of the 21st century, we're once again facing increased competition from other nation states. China, and Russia, which are going to require investments to make things like space and cyber and other advanced capabilities, including hypersonics. And this will be among the largest investments in our national security in history. Some people don't like the increase, but we're in a different world today. America is more prosperous, more successful, and more just when it is more secure. We can restore fiscal responsibility and safeguard our security at home and abroad while meeting the third value, what I call building a better America. Let's provide universal preschool, cap the cost of childcare at 7% of a family's income. Like many families, that would cut the cost of childcare in half. It'll make college more affordable. My budget doubles the maximum Pell Grant. Families making under $50,000 a year to nearly $13,000 and helps more than 8 million students who rely on Pell Grants pay for college. My budget invests in building more homes to keep us up to deal with the skyrocketing cost of housing for the middle class and the poor. My budget lowers family energy costs with tax credits to help people make their homes more efficient. Research and development to broaden the reach of solar and build a clean energy future. My budget also invests in other areas of bipartisan common good. I call them unity agendas. I spoke to them at the State of the Union. Beating the opioid epidemic, taking on challenges of mental health, supporting our veterans, and ending cancer as we know it. This budget includes investments to get Americans the mental health services they need, and we need them. And when it comes to fighting cancer and other diseases, my budget funds a new organization called ARPA-H at Health and Human Services at the Department of Health. And it stands for Advanced Research Projects for Health. It's based on DARPA, the Defense Department program that led to breakthroughs in technologies like the internet, GPS, and so much more. ARPA-H will drive breakthroughs to prevent, detect, and treat diseases, including Alzheimer's, diabetes, cancers, and more. And here's what this all adds up to. Historic deficit reduction, historic investment in our security at home and abroad by modernizing our capabilities in both areas, and an unprecedented commitment to building an economy where everyone has a chance to succeed. A plan to pay for those investments that we need as a nation. That's what we do. So I look forward to working with the members of Congress, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents to deliver this budget and keep delivering for the American people. I want to thank you all. And may God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Let me, Kelly O'Donnell, NBC.
Thank you, Mr. President. Do you believe what you said? Thank you, sir. Do you believe what you said, that Putin can't remain in power? Or do you now regret saying that because your government has been trying to walk that back? Did your words complicate matters?
Well, you asked 3 different questions. I'll answer them all. Number one, I'm not walking anything back. The fact of the matter is I was expressing the moral outrage I felt toward the way Putin is dealing and the actions of this man. Just brutality. Half the children in Ukraine. I just come from being with those families. But I want to make it clear. I wasn't then, nor am I now, articulating a policy change. I was expressing the moral outrage that I feel, and I make no apologies for it.
Personal feelings, sir. Your personal feelings?
My personal feelings. Secondly, you asked me about, well, what was the second part?
Does it complicate the diplomacy of this moment?
No, I don't think it does. You know, the fact is that we're in a situation where what complicates the situation at the moment is the escalatory efforts of Putin to continue to engage in carnage, the kind of behavior that makes the whole world say, "My God, what is this man doing?" That's what complicates things a great deal, but I don't think it complicates it at all. Let me go to Steve Holland, Reuters.
Mr. President, thank you. When you say that you're not walking anything back, you do feel that Vladimir Putin should be removed from power? Is that what you're saying? And
No, what I was expressing just what I said. I was expressing the moral outrage I felt towards this man. I wasn't articulating a policy change. And I think that, he continues on this course that he's on. he is going to become a pariah worldwide, and who knows what he becomes at home in terms of support.
And just to follow up, are you concerned this remark might escalate the conflict?
No, I'm not. I'm not at all.
Why
Look.
not, sir? Thank you.
And, you know, look, the other thing is that a couple people have asked me as well, might as well speak to it unless you want to ask the question, but, you know, that other governments have suggested that this is a problem, I'm escalating things. No. And has it weakened NATO? No, it hadn't. NATO has never, ever, 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 ever been as strong as it is today. Never.
So if saying he cannot remain in power does not mean regime change, what does it mean in your opinion?
It means that I would hope, it was expressing my outrage. He shouldn't remain in power. Just like, you know, bad people shouldn't continue to do bad things. But it doesn't mean we have a fundamental policy to do anything to take Putin down in any way.
What made you add that? Because that wasn't in your prepared remarks, we were told. So what made you add that at the end, Mr. President?
Because I was talking to the Russian people. The last part of the speech was talking to the Russian people, telling what we thought. I was communicating this to not only the Russian people, but the whole world. This is just stating a simple fact that this kind of behavior is totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. And the way to deal with it is to strengthen and keep NATO completely united and help Ukraine where we can. Cleve, you had a question. Where is he?
Thanks, Mr. President. On your budget, you've said repeatedly at the State of the Union that you're not for defunding the police. I do wonder how much emphasis you think should be put on alternative forms of crime prevention, not just defunding the police, but you know, crime reduction in communities.
Oh, a significant amount. I've laid that out in detail in the budget. For example, we do know that intervention programs work. We do know that what police need, they need psychologists in the department as much as they need extra rifles. They need people who are in the department who can deal with the crisis that the police are going through as well, dealing with their crises, dealing with their mental state and how they're handling things. They need social workers engaged with them. I lay it all out. And it all works. If you see these community intervention programs, they work. They actually reduce crime. They significantly reduce crime. So that's a big piece of it.
Just a follow-up. Is any of it related to political pressure from Republicans saying that Democrats are soft on crime, that, you know, that you guys are careening to the left?
Isn't that kind of fascinating? When I first got elected, I was being beat up because I supported the police too much for the previous 30 years. No. That's what I think. Ozma.
Oh, surprised to get called. Thank you, Mr. President. Are you willing to try to meet with Vladimir Putin? And I have a quick follow-up to that. When you last met with him face-to-face in Geneva, you had described that as a productive conversation. You said that he did not want a Cold War. And do you feel, given the actions, though, that have happened over the last few months, I guess I'm asking what has changed in his mind?
I don't know what's changed his mind. His behavior has changed. When we met, remember what we were talking about. We were talking about setting up a strategic dialogue and talking about the relationship of NATO and Russia and facing off in the regions and how we could have more transparency and all the rest. It was a normal discussion I had going all the way back to Kosygin and others back in 100 years ago when I was a young senator. And so what changed was nothing remotely approaching that. Remember when he first met with me, he said, I have two objectives. This is the second or third time I met with him. He said, I have two objectives. One is to make sure that they never become part of NATO. And two, to make sure there are no long-range missiles in there in Ukraine. I said, we could deal with the second one easily, but we can't close the door on the first. Because when we talk about missiles, we want to talk about what's also on the Russian border heading toward Europe. Do both. And then if you notice that demand list of his, not with me, with others, have escalated significantly in terms of what he thinks is necessary. Thank you.
We need some more clarification.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. Thank you very much.
I know you're going to ask a really nice question.
Well, it's an important question,
No,
I
it's
think. Are you worried that other leaders in the world are going to start to doubt that America is back if some of these big things that you say on the world stage keep getting walked back?
What's getting walked back?
It made it sound like just in the last couple days, it sounded like you told U.S. troops they were going to Ukraine. It sounded like you said it was possible the U.S. would use a chemical weapon, and it sounded like you were calling for regime change in Russia. And we know
None of the three occurred.
none of the three occurred.
None of the three.
Mr. President?
You interpret the language that way. I was talking to the troops. We're talking about helping train the troops that are the Ukrainian troops that are in Poland. That's what the context. I sat there with those guys for a couple hours. That's what we talked about.
So when you said you're going to see when you're there, you were not intending to
I was
say US
referring to
troops.
meeting with and talking with the Ukrainian troops who were in Poland.
And when you said a chemical weapon use by Russia would trigger a response in kind,
It will trigger a significant response.
what does that mean?
I'm not going to tell you. Why would I tell you? You got to be silly.
The world wants to know.
The world wants to know a lot of things. I'm not telling them what the response would be. Then Russia knows the response.
Mr. President.
All right, I'm going to take two more questions. One, two.
Mr. President, thank you. I still want to get back to your original words that he cannot remain in power. Can you help us understand, you have more foreign policy experience than any president who's ever held this office. Whether those are your personal feelings or your feelings as president, do you understand why people would believe you, as someone commanding one of the largest nuclear arsenals in the world, saying someone cannot remain in power is a statement of U.S. policy? And also, are you concerned about propaganda use of those remarks by the Russians?
No and no.
Tell me why. You have so much experience. You are the leader of this country.
Because it's ridiculous. Nobody believes we're going to take down. I was talking about taking down Putin. Nobody believes that. Number one. Number two, what have I been talking about since this all began? The only war that's worse than one intended is one that's unintended. The last thing I want to do is engage in a land war or a nuclear war with Russia. That's not part of it. I was expressing my outrage at the behavior of this man. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. And it's more an aspiration than anything. He shouldn't be in power. People like this shouldn't be ruling countries, but they do. The fact they do, but doesn't mean I can't express my outrage about it. Last question.
President, thank you. You've said that you're confident that your comment won't undermine diplomatic efforts. But just to be clear, are you confident that Vladimir Putin sees it that way, that he will not use this as an escalatory?
I don't care what he thinks. Look, here's the deal. He's going to do what he's going to do. Putin, look.
But you're not concerned that he may see your language and view that as a sign of a reason for escalation, use that as an excuse to escalate, given his
No.
recent behavior?
Given his recent behavior, excuse me, I shouldn't say that to you. Given his recent behavior, people should understand that he is going to do what he thinks he should do, period. He's not affected by anybody else, including, unfortunately, apparently his own advisors. This is a guy who goes to the beat of his own drummer. And the idea that he is going to do something outrageous because I called him for what he was and what he's doing, I think is just not rational.
You didn't say whether you'd meet him again. Would you meet with President
No.
Putin ever again?
It depends. No, it's not a question of the question is there something to meet on that would justify him being able to end this war and be able to rebuild Ukraine? That's the issue. Sure.
Can you just, sorry, can you say yes or no, Mr. President, whether or not you would be willing to meet with President Putin
It
again?
depends on what he wants to talk about.
Thank you. Okay, last question.
What if he wanted to talk about negotiations? Now, what if he
Hello,
wanted to?
you said Supreme Court. Now, don't play that.
Well, you can't leave that hanging.
Yeah, you're-
Just real quick, two matters on the Supreme Court. While you were away, there were reports about the wife of Justice Thomas and texts that she had with former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. Should Justice Thomas recuse himself from any cases involving the January 6th insurrection or former President Trump at this point?
I leave that to two entities.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, ask the second question.
No, two entities. Go ahead. Sorry.
One, the January 6th committee, and two, the Justice Department. That's their judgment, not mine to
So
make.
on Justice Thomas recusing, you don't think he should, or?
I said that, I told you, those things get into legal issues. That in fact, I told you I would not tell the Justice Department what position to take or not take. And I'm not going to instruct the Congress either.
And did you get any chance to watch much of the Judiciary Committee
I didn't
hearings
get a
last
chance
week?
to see any of it, unfortunately.
The fact that Republicans were questioning Judge Jackson on matters like former sentences related to child pornography cases or the definition of a woman, does that, as the former chairman of the Judiciary Committee, make sense to you?
Look, this is one of the most qualified nominees ever nominated for the Supreme Court in every respect, in terms of her disposition, her intellectual capacity, her experience and background, serving on three additional courts, a woman who is totally, thoroughly qualified, and will be a great addition to the court, in my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, sir.
Do you think that Russia is behind the alleged poisoning of those Ukrainian